Welcome back to the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast. I'm Tom Duncan.
And I'm Dana Duncan.
And we're bringing to you tonight possibly a controversial movie. We're hoping not. The Help from 2011. Something that is a little bit more relevant to the current goings-on in the country, as well as the overall conversation, and more modern than some of the more recent films we've been doing. We're still trying to figure out how to position the show. So we're going to see if there are a few different options for how we stagger our movie choices per week, and make sure that it's palatable for the audience, that we're not getting lost on some of these older films that some of the audience may not have seen, or but we are also hoping that you will try and watch some of these movies. So this one in particular, and the next three that we have up that I mentioned last week on the show. So next week is Zodiac from 2005 from David Fincher, Silence of the Lambs from 1991, and 1985, E.T. from Steven Spielberg. So, but those are all on Netflix. So, there probably aren't too many Americans at this point that don't have access to some type of Netflix account at this point. So, if you'd like to, please go watch these movies and follow along so that we have a little bit better listener base. But I guess that's not the thing I wanted to say, but you understand a little bit more of the conversation we're having. All right, so let's dive in as best as we can on this movie. You and I were just talking briefly before we started the show that I had forgotten how much part of the debate or consternation over this movie. This was included among an article highlighted in 2014 over the decrimement of the so-called white savior in Hollywood. This has been one of those palatable race relations movies, and I think there are a lot of dense subject material to kind of put into this one. So I'm hoping they have a good discussion on it. But just for our normal listening audience, what is your original relationship to this movie? I think yours is about the same as mine.
I saw the movie, did not remember a whole lot about the movie. I want to say that it's based on a book that your mother read.
That's correct.
I can't remember.
Yes.
And I think so. And she wanted to see it. So at some point we're planning on having Mom in here to discuss some movies. I know we have her booked for our eventual Pillow Talk movie review. Not to be crass, but that is actually the title of a movie for the listening audience, in case you haven't heard of it, but it is my mother's favorite movie. That being said, yes, it is a book that she originally read, then she went and watched the movie because they were coming out about the same time. Loved the movie, and then roped you and I into watching it later on when we got the Blu-ray or whatever it was before the Oscars that year. And I remember liking the movie, but there were certain pieces of it that because I haven't seen it nor really sought it out to watch, that I completely forgot. And I mentioned to you again just before we started here, I completely forgot Emma Stone was in this movie, because that entire storyline, and you would think she's supposed to be the primary character who drives a lot of the plot. It's pretty much her or Viola Davis, and I don't understand exactly how I forgot her in this movie, but I completely missed it. So, like, I didn't think when I picked this a week ago that this was quite as glossed over and as some other potentially controversial subject choices, like when we eventually get to Driving Miss Daisy, or when the embargo comes off and we have to talk about Green Book. Those are like highlighted ones. But this was interesting on rewatch, and there are some different thoughts I had than what I originally thought I would be having going into this one. So, all right, just the quick background on the movie. In 1960s Mississippi, Southern society girl Skeeter, played by Emma Stone, returns from college with dreams of being a writer. She turns her small town on its ear by choosing to interview the black women who have spent their lives taking care of prominent white families. Only Aibileen, played by Viola Davis, the housekeeper of Skeeter's best friend, will talk at first. But as the pair continue the collaboration, more women decide to come forward, and as it turns out, they have quite a lot to say. As we noted, this is actually based on a book. I should note, for the sake of context, that the woman who wrote the book was sued by her former housekeeper for basically taking her life story, or that was the allegation. It was dismissed for statute of limitations, but the fact that this even comes, or this story even arrives as a fictitious version of stealing a black person's story, or at least creating some narrative off of them, already is setting this potentially back. Okay, thanks for your input on that one.
Let's just put it this way. I am treading very carefully on this.
Oh yeah,
because the chances of saying something wrong are so high.
Oh yeah,
I don't know what to say or not to say. I mean, it did portray what it was like to be afraid, to have police brutality in the film.
Well, I mean, there's only one
and treated like
that happens kind of off screen, but yeah, I understand what you mean. It's the only thing we haven't done to like completely pander to the discussion is have a token black friend on the podcast this week. Like,
you better watch you using the term token at this point too.
I understand, but like, the notion of, okay, first off, disclaimer. If we say anything to offend someone, please write into the show, contact me in whichever manner so I can allow you the space to ream me out, because I am an ignorant white man. I will admit that freely, and I have severe blind spots because I grew up in a really white community and still live in one. So I'm going to attempt to give this as much context as I possibly can, but I am not a fit person to necessarily be having this discussion. Yet, if I'm not willing to be part of the discussion, I think that does prolong the problem. I guess we're tiptoeing around it, but we do have to kind of like dive in a little bit. So for recognition purposes, we'll just cut to that. This movie was nominated for Best Picture at the time. It was nominated for Best Actress for Viola Davis and Best Supporting Actress Jessica Chastain. It also won for Best Supporting Actress for Octavia Spencer. So, being extremely careful, what is this movie about?
It is about racism and at the same time reliance. I mean, you are racist to the point that you will not allow black women to use your bathroom, but you have no problem with them raising your children. The dichotomy of it, okay? And they show this repeatedly, okay? it also raises the specter of what I've commented about. And I come at this as being, okay, this took place slightly before and slightly after the Kennedy assassination, because it is in the film. All right.
I was gonna say, because Medgar Evers was just before Kennedy, if I remember right. It was the summer of '63.
I want to say it was August of '63. And okay, so that's what's going on here. So just remember, I was born 5 days after. So I come at this as being a product of this time frame.
Yes,
I remember race riots. Seeing them on TV. I remember when Martin Luther King was shot, barely. I remember when Kennedy was shot, barely. Okay, so I remember integrated busing. I remember integrating the colleges. I remember Lester Maddox is the governor of Alabama making was Alabama or Georgia? I can't remember offhand. I think it was Georgia now that I'm thinking about it, making his racial comments about entry into the university system. So I remember a lot of this. And I grew up in Beloit, which had a fairly large minority population for Wisconsin. Okay? So I grew up in this. But I'm still coming at this as a white male who is privileged, okay?
Extremely.
And yes, all right, so I can understand. Now, I will say this. This movie portrays bigotry and racism in overt terms. It's clear, okay? The problem is anymore, I think it started in that time frame up north. It was open in the South. At least in the South, you knew who the racists were. Okay?
Yes.
The problem is it highlights that up here in the North and now, the racists have been driven underground. And so the racism pops up in other places and in other ways. What was the kid that got Trayvon Martin? It became a euphemism. He was wearing a hoodie. Well, he's a black kid. That's what that meant. And so you have to be
or urban or thug or certain other phraseology that's used, and we joke and we've made fun of for previous history. The sports commentators' language of when they describe either black athletes or white athletes, and oh, well, that guy is just a really hard worker. Okay, he's going to be white. Oh, that guy's really eloquent. Oh, he's definitely black, but he's well spoken. Like there's certain pieces surrounding it, but I do agree, and it was a part I was going to bring up as part of a later discussion. So, but we'll go into this now. It's one of the big problems I have with this, and that I'm realizing now, is these are the comfortable films for white people because it makes certain racism so overt that you're like, oh, I'm not like that, so I must not be so bad. I'm not, trying to make everybody have separate toilets or that you can't basically eat out of the same trough or whatever it is. I'm not stopping people for no good reason to cause problems, or I'm not beating people or all these other things that are the extreme versions. But it's all the small little things sometimes that we don't even realize that that's where we're at currently that has more to say. This is just, and this is where I'm going to go about it. So what is this movie about? You remember the line that's constantly throughout the film. You is kind, you is smart, you is important. Basically, it's all lives and stories matter, but it's the Disney version of it. And when I say the Disney version, literally Disney's the distributor of this movie because it was Touchstone Pictures. So this is like glossed over. It doesn't matter. Disney was the distributor.
All right.
Because Touchstone had the production piece, even if DreamWorks was putting it out. So ultimately, And I think I'm finally starting to get it in the same way where you have certain other things, or like the way we talked about like Hidden Figures a few years ago, and I'm like, I didn't think it was like the Disney version. I thought it was kind of nice and whatever else, but you kind of get a different sense of it when you start to really understand what they were talking about to begin with. This notion of the extreme version to make ourselves feel better because I'm not that bigoted, or I'm not that guy, therefore I must be okay. And yet it's part of that piece of it. At the same time, I have very complicated feelings about the white savior discussion, which we'll save, but that I understand it, and I understand the point they're making, but I do have a little bit of pushback on that ultimately because of something else. So, but we'll get to that as far as it goes. So
here's the dilemma that you face, okay? You have to look at two different aspects of the situation. For this film, okay, it portrayed the senseless bigotry that they had to endure, okay? And yes, it was made more palatable for a white audience, but it did expose you to bigotry of the Deep South in the 1960s, right at the beginning of the real major portion of the civil rights movement. If you would have come out and done a film that showed the inherent bigotry that exists in culture overall, how many white people would actually bother to listen to it or watch it, or would be so turned off by it that they wouldn't pay attention to the story or try to even understand it? So it's almost that they talk about police or the brutality, the dehumanization of blacks in this country, but by the same token, you can't just cut us off and say you either have to agree with us completely right now, or you're just out of it. You're out of control, or you're not worth dealing with.
All right, so
you have to bring us along, and this film does do that. You have to come to some terms with what's going on, and you have to be able to be educated. You can't. It's not like jumping into the deep end of the pool on a cold day.
I disagree a little bit because part of the discussion is the notion of white fragility, that we're not capable of handling some of the sins of our fathers sometimes, or seeing our mistakes or past wrongdoings and accepting them as our responsibility, even though maybe not directly, but it certainly is indirectly. We are the product of what we've done in the environment that we do, and only by our actions currently do we have the ability to do anything about it. So I'll point to this, and I'll make an analogy that makes or pulls in a slightly different part of the conversation. What's the difference between The Greatest Story Ever Told and Passion of the Christ? That, to me, is the difference between this movie and the movie that won Best Picture 2 years later, 12 Years a Slave. Like, you want to depict the just gross and intense nature of the way we've collectively, historically treated black people. And we are, and I think there are a lot of ways in which 12 Years a Slave won Best Picture, and we had Moonlight, which was like this celebration of both black culture but LGBT forwardness, and then we get Green Book, everybody saying that that's a setback, but it's kind of the way in which we've gone through this decade that maybe it'll be remembered 20 years from now, is this back and forth slinky nature where we had to kind of I don't want to use the term wake up, but like, because it's cliche, but ultimately that we were just starting to deal with some of those pieces. And that was post, when we solved racism by electing a black president. So,
oh yeah, I heard that too when Colin Powell was named chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I had a judge who's long since dead who would make every black child, in a juvenile delinquent hearing, would lecture them and go, your days of saying you can't succeed are gone. Do you realize that we have an African American as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff? And I remember this is in like 1990, and I'm going, okay, and what does that do for you? The Army, at least, is based on merit.
Well, and it's the most integrated version of the government that we probably have.
And it didn't cross his mind that that's not an exhibit of race, or that doesn't resolve racism. Really, I've been really trying to think of this and come to terms with this. The number of times I hear people use the term, well, we only act this way towards African Americans because they have such a high incidence of crime in their population. Okay?
We've heard it from one end of our dinner table for how many years?
I know. But here's the problem with that concept. Okay? Did we, by the nature of how we have dealt with African Americans in this country, from the moment they're born and the fact of what their parents have had to live through, created an atmosphere where they have not as much hope, not as much promise, and a great deal of frustration, so that we basically create a situation where they're bound to be not necessarily in step with what white culture expects or wants.
You want to know one of the most systemic, and this is maybe an outside discussion, but I'll put this. One of the more systemic pieces of ingrained racism in the country, property taxes. Property taxes basically set up white communities to remain exactly the way that they're supposed to. They set up their schools, they set up everything else. And by creating this system whereby that's the only means, by you paying for certain things in your local community, where most of the governmental decisions, most of the stuff that impacts you directly happens, you're setting up a separate but equal system. Pure and simple.
And now I think back on this. There was a few years ago a best-selling book written by a former Marine called The Other Wes Moore. And what the story was this guy became a decorated Marine and became an author, became a motivational speaker, all this. But yet there was another guy from his community around Detroit whose name was Wes Moore. And that guy murdered a police officer and was serving life imprisonment. And they both grew up in the same neighborhood with single mothers. And why is it that he turned out that way and the other Wes Moore turned out in prison? And he went through his life story. And it was a lot about the fact that his mother would not stand for certain behaviors or certain influences. And so she actually worked a second job to help put him into a private school, a military academy, so that he was out of the inner city of Detroit. And that was the difference in his life. Well, if you think about just that aspect, and then turn it to the fact that so many African Americans don't have that option, do not have any hope, any belief that they could ever succeed, what do you expect the result is going to be?
We haven't created a equal starting point by which they can get a footing on that, and then we try and make up for it with things that seemingly create more problems than they solve, like affirmative action, where we have a weird back and forth discussion where I don't even know where the playing field is on that one, but we're trying to like retcon stuff that should have been taken care of by I don't know, creating better schools, hiring better teachers because we were able to invest more in other communities. But by singling out and creating property tax being one of the primary barometers by which you can create your community systems, then that's going to be the only thing that solves it. And in, where the real estate is not high and you can't charge huge property taxes, or where there aren't wealthy people, of course you're not going to be able to get a lot of money to improve the schools. So it's just a system continually repeating itself.
Well, and then take into account also some of the other problems, which is, for example, Wisconsin has workfare. Wisconsin works, W-2. Okay? Instead of having the poor, which tend to be a lot of minorities, especially in places like Madison and Milwaukee,
well,
you're now taking them away from raising their children and being home. And what's happening to the children? I mean, the whole concept of AFDC was to pay or allow mothers to be at home to raise their children. And
you got to be systematic. You're treading on the toes of another potential discussion of landmines. So I'm just going to warn you that, this notion of that,
this is going to
be careful on that point. I don't want to get into this America is better because of families discussion. That is a whole other bag of fun.
I'm not going there. That's not my point. My point is that there are so many things. I mean, this is an onion. Okay? Right now we have a blight on the onion, which is the brutality of police in general. I have witnessed police brutality towards, on 2 occasions, to a suspect. Okay? And both times I did nothing. I didn't say anything. I didn't make a complaint. I just watched it. Because, hey, that's a police officer. I don't know anything about policing. I'm going to let them handle it because they're the professionals. And, and I'm sure that there are multiple times that that's happened across this country, and with people who are not any worse intending or have any worse intentions than I did, which is I didn't really have any reason to be upset or having any hatred towards the defendant or anything about it, but I just gave the benefit of the doubt to the police. I'm sure I'm not
saying
alone.
Now that you not only think differently, but because if you're thinking about that now, there's got to be some sense of guilt.
Well, there is, because I can remember both instances really clearly yet to this day. I can tell you right where it took place and what I was doing. So obviously these 2 incidences are burned into my memory.
Okay.
Anyway, I suppose this is a full discussion in and of itself, and maybe we're treading too far afield. But
well, yeah, but I think for the full rounded context of the discussion that needs to happen for this film, and we've kind of wandered in some different places, and I figured we were going to once we got on tonight, but it kind of needs to. You need to provide as much context in order to discuss something like this fairly. So,
well, and maybe we need to. We could really do this as a number here. We could as soon as it's available again, do Gone with the Wind, and then there's a couple of different Spike Lee films that would be.
Well,
appropriate to watch.
The one that I still want to find is almost never on streaming. So, and that's his most famous one, Do the Right Thing.
Yeah.
There are a few that we could potentially do. I don't know how much we want to dip into it after we do this one. Like, take a break, breathe a little, for having flown kind of close to the sun a little bit for 2 very privileged white guys. But
well, I mean,
But
the problem I'm having, for
discuss
example, is that I just got done seeing an interview that Jon Stewart gave. Okay, I didn't see it. I mean, I read it. He did an interview. And immediately, I then find an article written by a African American activist who just raked him over the coals. And I'm going, when I heard Jon Stewart's comments, I thought they were perfectly reasonable and enlightened. And now I read this other article and I'm going, oh my, I have no idea what's right. I have no idea what's wrong. I am like completely lost as to what I'm supposed to think, feel, believe, try to understand, try to figure out what I'm supposed to do. And maybe the best thing to do is to separate from this for not just a week or two, but for a couple of months and let this thing kind of sort through. And maybe through time, more of this will become clearer to us or understanding, because I am certainly at a loss for what exactly it is.
I take the exact opposite approach, to be honest. I know I'm going to be wrong. And I'm probably going to say some stupid things. I'm likely completely ignorant to something that I'm going to say. But I'm going to try, and then I will make corrections. You know, we're so afraid of every comment could be your last in public, or you could be canceled or whatever else. And I'm sorry, I refuse to be that one thing unless you have, you know, you're making or repeating some type of weird David Duke speech. I'm just to write somebody. Well, okay, I'm sorry. Roseanne Barr needs to be canceled, and that has almost nothing to do with any of her opinions. It's just I don't like her. But that's beside the point. Anyway, the point being that we're going to have patience, because I'm not going to get it right the first time. I'm not going to get it right the second time. I'm probably not going to get it right the first 30 times. But if I'm trying to get better, if I'm trying to be better each day and make an effort, I hope that's at least something, because I don't know what to do. I'm not going to know what to say.
Well, and here's the thing, too. Where we live and where we are and such, it's not like I wouldn't have any African-American friends. I've had African-American friends in law school and in college and such. It's just I don't have any here. So I can't go and say, I'm trying to understand. Explain something to me. Who am I going to talk to about it?
Okay, that's somewhat fair. I mean, there is plenty of material, but I don't even think there's agreement within the Black community right now as to where everybody is, other than there definitely needs to be certain reforms enacted. Outside of that, like, I don't know where any line is or what anything's going to be done. But that's probably enough on the greater conversation, at least, so we can start discussing the rest of the movie.
All right.
So, all right. Best performance.
I liked Octavia Spencer in this a lot.
I think she gets most of the best, like, comedic lines, so she gets the opportunity to shine on that. But I can definitely see. I mean, she won the Oscar, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
Is that who you're going with?
I guess I would have to.
I'm going to go with Viola Davis.
Okay.
I said at the time that I thought she deserved it at that point. Now, to be fair, she was going up against probably the pillar of Hollywood acting in Meryl Streep, who won for playing Margaret Thatcher. But
And she has subsequently won an Oscar. But I don't think I have this placed down anywhere where I can confirm it, not that it matters anyway. But I'm pretty sure that I thought at the time she should have won Best Actress for that. But, okay. I still, for both of them in particular, this was a launching pad movie.
Yes.
Like, she's won an Emmy, she's won an Oscar, she's been in a ton of stuff since that point. Octavia Spencer has been in a bunch of different things. But I still thought they did the best because they brought certain personality to each of these pieces and were real characters, even if it didn't always, it wasn't the primary point sometimes of the film. So, best minor performance.
Depends on how much you consider minor. I mean, I liked Bryce Dallas Howard, and I also liked Allison Janney.
Well, okay, first off, nobody likes Bryce Dallas Howard in this film. You just think she does such a good job being utterly despicable.
Yes, that's what I'm getting at. Because everything I'm reading about her and everything I've seen about her, she's probably as nice as her dad.
Yeah.
And so this was a big acting job by her to be such a bitch.
You think of all of the people that were in this film, from one thing or another, that are bigger stars now, at least for women, that had multiple Oscar nominations or bigger franchise. I mean, Bryce Dallas Howard went on to be a part of a huge movie franchise later on in the decade in the Jurassic World movies. Jessica Chastain got nominated for multiple Oscars after the fact. And I can't think of her name now, but one of the friends who ends up being or part of the Bridge Club, who is part of the Pitch Perfect movies, Viola Davis, Octavia Spencer. I mean, they're just people all over the place, even in smaller roles. The pastor of the church is David Oyelowo, for gosh sakes. I mean,
yeah,
they're just, this movie is littered with people we know now. Like, we didn't at the time, but we definitely know them now. And, I mean, oh, gosh, I'm drawing a blank now, but, Emma Stone. I mean, she won an Oscar later in the decade. So, I mean, this was one where she was transitioning away from being, like, the teen actress toward being something more dramatic and serious. But,
yeah,
because, like, up until this point, I think her two most notable films were Easy A and Superbad. But, anyway. So, I had down Octavia Spencer for this because I don't think you can really separate most of the movie. It does not work without those two strong performances. Like, you can't just color over their, and I don't mean that as irony or a pun or anything else. It was a turn of phrase. But you can't, this movie certainly doesn't work without them, and it only works because of them in that same vein.
Yeah.
The strength of their personality just comes through in so many ways. All right, most charismatic?
Good question. That's a difficult one.
Right, I did Jessica Chastain, and it's for one very distinct reason. And this is just me on a personal level, and it's not meant to be something else or part of a larger discussion. Oh, of course, he chose the white woman. No, it's that vulnerability and the drive of a lot of white men to save the lonely crying girl. You know, you want to play the superhero type that saves the damsel in distress, and that's basically all of her character through this movie. Like, she plays a hard ass in so many other movies, notably Zero Dark 30, where I'm pretty sure she was also nominated for. But in this movie, she's much more vulnerable and accessible, and for whatever reason, it just plays well that way. So,
honorable mention to Leslie Jordan, who is the editor of the newspaper. This guy's a long-time character actor who is just, every time you see him, he pops off the screen because he's just so flamboyant and colorful.
Yeah. Also, I forgot to mention that Allison Janney was a huge part of this film too, and she's also won an Oscar. So, yeah. I mean, this decade, no less. So,
an Oscar, an Emmy.
I don't know about Tony's. I don't know.
I'm not sure about a Tony either, but
I would doubt she's won a Grammy. But I mean, she's
taking over the Comiskey acting school from Michael Douglas.
Oh, she's damn suited for it. Like, she might be. I don't say this lightly. She's in the conversation for greatest living actress right now.
That was the cliffhanger for season 2 of the Comiskey Method, which is Allison Janney ends up on a coup taking over the Comiskey acting school, because at least she's won an Emmy and an Oscar. What's he won?
Yeah. Okay. I didn't realize that you were bringing in an also on Netflix show.
Yes.
So, all right. So, did you have a most charismatic? You just had your honorable mention, but
really, for the comic relief, even though she's been around forever, Sissy Spacek.
Yeah, I can buy it.
And whenever she was on the screen, you were drawn to her. She's 70 years old.
Now or during the movie?
Now.
Oh, all right.
And I mean, I remember loosely seeing her in her first big film, which was Carrie, which was a Stephen King. I think one of the first Stephen King novels to be turned into a film. And and then she did Coal Miner's Daughter and on and on. So she's been a long-time actress and has been around in Hollywood, and she's now getting those elderly woman parts and doing a good job of it whenever she is able to find something in which to act.
Yeah. She will come up again later here in the episode. But I think that's probably a really good spot to cut for one of our sponsors. We'll come back with best scenes and best lines before we get to the grading. And welcome back. All right, so where we left off was the best scenes. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 scenes nominated. All right. So the intro to the Bridge Club. Essentially, this is the setup for revealing how bad Hilly Holbrook is and the separate bathrooms bill that she wants the governor to take up. And it's basically just it's a good setup scene. It's really just giving you your first taste into who her character is going to become and that she's the villain of this film. Number 2, just because I thought this was a great scene just overall, even though it is, I'll probably put this as a downgrade in my overall for classicness. Are you having unnatural thoughts about women?
Yeah.
And Allison Janney's like uncomfortable conversation because, oh my God, my daughter might be single.
Yeah.
Yeah. That does not play well on the classicness aspect. All right. Constantine helped Skeeter to believe in herself. It was just a nice little moment where they this insight into why the quote-unquote white savior of the movie, who decides that she wants to tell the story of black people, particularly maids, and why she would even be interested to begin with, because she has an affection towards, as she puts it many times over, the woman who raised her and helped her through all of the crap her mother flung at her. So...
By the way, is this the first time you've ever seen anything that Cicely Tyson has ever done?
Is that the...
Constantine.
Yeah, I don't remember her from anything else, so I don't know. I'd have to look at her filmography.
She did a lot of work in the early 70s when she was a young actress. And then kind of fell off. My guess is she was probably raising a family and then got to that point where... I mean, how many, back in the 70s and 80s, how many middle-aged black women roles were there?
Well, how many black women roles, period? Like,
yeah, well.
So, I'm just trying to look her up once and see if I...
The Diary of...
on Chips?
Diary of Miss Jane Brody. I want to say that won her an Emmy. It was one of the early mini-series where she was she played the part of a old woman who has been part of the Underground Railroad. And then they were interviewing her. She's old, and then they would flash back. I remember watching that as a kid.
Apparently she was in House of Cards, but it might have been episodes I didn't see because I stopped watching it. It kind of went off a weird clip for me, and I never even bothered finishing the show. There are several shows where it just gets so far from what it originally was that I just can't continue. And I'm trying to look, and we're taking a weird sidestep for this particular one. I guess I saw Roots. She was in that.
Yes, she was.
I wouldn't have remembered her because we watched that in grade school, and I would have had no idea. She was in an episode of Mission Impossible, but who knows? I mean, she was in an episode of The Cosby Show and some other stuff, so this might be the only thing that I'm aware of for.
Yeah.
But, okay. And that's fine. So, the first scene with Minnie meeting Celia, basically just because Celia is used to everybody turning her down and not trying to help her or whatever else. And it was just a fun comedic scene that kind of let both of the two characters really shine and gave you the impetus of what their relationship was going to be ongoing past that point. So, next one I had, what's law going to say? You have to be nice to your maid. Essentially the scene where Minnie decides to help and answer questions in order to help write the piece. And it just, again, it's another one where Octavia Spencer, she has most of the best lines and probably most of the best memorable scenes from this particular movie. And
it's just another one where she's given the opportunity to really kind of step forward, and she's turned the tables by being intimidating towards Emma Stone, who's like kind of shuts down for a minute. I got to ask the questions myself too, that type of stuff. So number 6, Yule May Arrested. The new maid who ends up taking over for Minnie. It's the one real incident where we get, or we broach the current topic of what we have now. She's arrested by the police. She's struggling. There's a dispute, and finally she's like beaten severely, and that's really the turning point where all the maids see what's capable. Even if they stay silent, it's not going to end well for them, so they might as well start fighting back, even if it may hurt them, because it's not like they're in any better situation anyway, and at least this way they have a say in what their story is going to be. One of the funnier scenes of the movie, Bring Your Old Commodes. And all of so you get all the toilets sitting on the front lawn, and you get that precious little scene of the little girl ending up squatting and thinking she's so proud because she's using the potty on her own, and then of course she gets spanked because So all right, number 8. What I also have down as my most indelible moment: the chocolate pie scene.
Yes,
I mean, by far, and it's the thing that my mother talked about to try and rope us into this thing. It was the thing she was laughing about. It's the thing that she kept bringing up with Grandma after the movie, is this retribution scene where she gets one over on it, and they keep bringing it up throughout the film. So it really is that scene. It's hard to really convey every piece of that. It will come up here because I have one of the quotes down, but it conveys most of this movie, and it's the one area other than the book where somebody kind of got the upper hand for once. But
yeah,
all right. Skeeter finally realizes the truth about Constantine, or her mother tells her. It was just... It's probably one of the emotional highs of the movie, even though it's not... And maybe that's a part where we might knock it down because it's focusing on the white person's relationship to all of these maids more than anything else, but it does give the resolution to Emma Stone and Allison Janney, and kind of sets up some of those ending sequences, which, maybe shouldn't have been the primary piece of this movie, but that's another argument's sake. So, Hilly storms up to I don't know what's Skeeter's last name, or even, but basically goes over to their house and gets told off by her mom. Ultimately, that's just a scene specifically where you get that feel good of somebody's made that catharsis or made that change where maybe they've kind of realized their past actions and are trying to make amends, even as terrible as some of their actions have been. And then finally, number 11, the last scene, Aibileen confronts Hilly, who basically goes through a power play to get her fired, and it's the real emotional conclusion that this movie needed in order to be where it was, that focuses back on Viola Davis and her relationship with the child, and all of the things that go into that and how they've made this up to be. So do you have any others that you'd like to throw in there?
Yeah, Skeeter and her boyfriend having the confrontation and ending the relationship on the porch. That was symbolic of the end of Skeeter's trying to still retain her her foot in the old South. At this point, she's been rejected by the South, and her future is going to be in the North and away from this life.
Yeah, I didn't want to put too many in here, and there were a few that I tossed out just for the sake of time, but I definitely I would tend to agree on your conception of that one. It does have that emotional resonance you're looking for. My problem only with that is it's still part of the Skeeter scenes of that. And so ultimately, I guess if I'm going to choose a best scene, I'm going to choose the last one, just because it's the true crux of what this film should have and kind of was. It is a confrontation between the over-the-top bigoted character in Hilly versus the maid who started it all. And in relation to, you have May Mobley, the child, crying at the end because she's not coming back. And she doesn't know what she's going to do without her. Yeah. So that
is
to
a good
me,
scene.
That's
probably the most pivotal scene, I admit, but I really liked the scene with the bridge club because that just portrayed these women as what they were, which was, it was a hen party. I mean, these people were so incredibly superficial. They didn't have a thought in their head between them, except how to be bigoted and how to down other people in order to make themselves look better.
That is the more important part of it is I don't know if I'd go quite as strongly, but it's an exclusivity aspect. We only feel good about ourselves by excluding others. So, favorite scene? I'll go with
pie.
Just because I have that as our chocolate pie is my most indelible moment. I'll do the bring your old commodes just because I thought both of them were very funny, but all right. So, best line, I have a few nominees. I will just slowly get to these. If you have any other ones, let me know. Aibileen to May Mobley, you is kind, you is smart, you is important. Just because, and again, I bring that one back around, it was kind of part of my what is this movie about, but I do think it sets a certain tone for the movie that, yes, she's saying it to the child so that they have a certain level of self-esteem, but it's kind of like a self-affirmation in a sense. And it comes to be a recurring part of the theme, or at least what the movie is attempting to live up to, even if it misses the mark. So, number 2, Mrs. Walters, I may have trouble remembering my own name or what country I live in, but there's 2 things I can't seem to forget. That my own daughter threw me in a nursing home and that she ate many shit. Good night. And it's the crux of Sissy Spacek's character in this movie. So it's just a fun one to include because, again, it's the chocolate pie. So anyway, Aibileen, what if you don't like what I've got to say? Skeeter, this isn't about me. And again, this is telling of what the movie should have been. It should have been the story of the maids, and it too often creeps into. There are probably way too many scenes of Skeeter with her dating life. There are too many scenes of her with her mother and how she's dealing with all of this when it probably should have been focusing on the help. I mean, it's the frickin' title of the thing. She's just an avenue to it, but we'll get to this here when we get to grading a little bit. Hilly, I've drafted the Home Health Sanitation Initiative. Skeeter, the what? A bill that requires every white home to have a separate bathroom for the help. Maybe we should just build you a bathroom outside, Hilly. Skeeter, I got a job today. Charlotte, where? Writing for the Jackson Journal. Great, you can write my obituary. Charlotte Phelan dead, her daughter still single. There are so many passive-aggressive lines in this movie.
Yeah.
Any other ones that you'd like to add?
My son said that there was going to be a writer in this family. I can't remember the exact quote. I guess that's going to be me.
Yeah, I think that's part of the ending monologue.
It was earlier in the thing, and then it was at the end.
Okay. Yeah, I don't remember the exact timing. So as far as best line, I'll go with "You was kind, you was smart, you was important." I will do my honorable mention for the idealism line. What if you don't like what I've got to say? This isn't about me. Any different thoughts?
No, I'll agree with that.
And then it's probably a debate between the other ones. They were more of the funniest pieces. So I'll go with the Mrs. Walters, but did you have another one that you might have had?
No, I mean, Leslie Jordan, I mean, close the damn door. Every time he spoke, he's got that lilt in his voice that's just, it's just funny, no matter what he says.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Oh, yeah. Another person that I didn't highlight, but Mary Steenburgen.
Yes.
Also in this film. Like, they pop up all over here that I'm forgetting half of them, but I'm just remarking while I was watching it the other night for how many, like, big actresses are in this movie. So, anyway. All right. So, you ready for the grading?
Sure.
All right. What do you have down for legacy?
7.
So, I debated this one a little bit. What's your argument?
Well, it's already becoming outdated.
No, we're 9 years on, and it's becoming outdated. And also, I don't think I've seen too many people bring up this movie a lot after the Oscars. So if it has a legacy, and this is where I struggled in between the two pieces of it, I'll go with a 5, but really, I think its only legacy is the amount of big-time actresses that either got their launching pad or whatever out of this movie. This is a primarily, not primarily, it's almost exclusively female-led cast. Yes. And it gave a lot of opportunities. I mean, we've already mentioned the amount of people that went on to win Emmys or Oscars or whatever that were a part of this movie after this movie. And it just, for a industry that has, at least in even 2011, I mean, we're not even to the point yet in 2011 where we got to the Oscars so white incidents, but that we had opportunities for key roles that won an Oscar and launched careers for several of them, for minority women and for just women in general. I think that more than anything is its legacy, but I can't give it a whole lot of credit on just about anything else.
This had the most female leads, or the most female dominant cast that I had seen probably since Steel Magnolias had been out, probably 20 years earlier.
Yeah.
That one kind of launched Julia Roberts' career. It launched Olympia Dukakis. They had been acting before, but this kind of put them on the map. So
impact, significance. I think at the time, it was nominated for several Oscars. It won one. I think it was part of a cultural thing. I mean, this movie made quite a bit of money at the time.
and it was part of the pop cultural lexicon. So I went with a 6, but it's a very soft 6. I guess we never settled on legacies, so if we took the difference between yours and mine and averaged it out, that's a 6 for legacy. But the impact significance, I don't see. It's not like it solved racism or gave us a whole lot of extra insight or whatever else. I think most of its backing is you had a female-led movie. That part of the primary storyline was about minority women from the 60s who you finally gave a shot and they really shined. And they've gone on to, do some extraordinary stuff so far. So I guess I'll put that as a 6, but again, it's a soft 6.
I had a 5 because I just didn't. I mean, this was a one blip on the radar. It's not like it had a major impact on much other than the launching of several careers. There were so many films that have been released since that have had more to say about that era.
Well, or minority cultures in general.
Yeah.
I'll put something like Parasite in that level, that you have an international foreign film about class, basically warfare, that wins Best Picture. I mean, I couldn't have fathomed that 10 years ago. There's just no way. So, but it is part of that. So, all right. So that puts us at 5.5 for that one. Novelty, I moved it up slightly because there are not a lot of movies with a hugely female-led cast. And again, there are not a lot of guys in this movie. All of the husbands seem to leave whenever there's something going on. Probably the most significant, because he's in multiple scenes, there are 2 significant black men that are in this movie. The guy named Henry, who works the counter at the drugstore, and the pastor, played by David Oyelowo. Other than that,
and the one black guy who also is a pivotal role is never seen, Leroy.
Yeah, okay, that's true. I'll grant you that, but and again, that comes in some of the complaints about this movie that I don't know if I'm equipped to levy. That just reading some of the reviews or stuff at the time. So, but I went with a 5 because, it did open the door on a couple of movies and where we were going to go the rest of this decade. But it's not like it was saying anything that was overly new, but it did also give a lot of opportunities to women. So I can't fault it from that as far as a novelty standpoint. It probably won't age the same in novelty, but at least where I'm sitting right now, that's where I got to go.
5.5.
All right. So you went with a 5.5, or you're settling?
It's where I had.
All right. So then we got to put it as a 5.25. But all right. So, what did you have down for classicness? So I had a 2, and this is probably the lowest I've ever gone on any one particular category so far. I'd have to rewind the tape, but I didn't think this while watching the movie, but I've certainly been influenced by reading and researching this after the fact and the way certain people feel about it. So number 1, we went through the Me Too movement, which this is not served very well for, because there's certainly issues of abuse and wife beating, particularly in Octavia Spencer's issue, and they just kind of gloss over it, where she'll have a mark or two and they'll make a comment, or I don't want to go home tonight, or the one phone call where she's getting beaten up while she's on the phone, but then they just resolve it where everything's off screen, number one, and then she just leaves Leroy with her children, and then that's that. Like, they don't really get into it. They don't want to make that part of the film, so then why have it at all? 2, the police brutality scene. If you wanted to give it impact, you really got to play that one up a little bit more and give it that kind of like intense dose that you didn't. They Disney-fied that scene. We already talked about the extreme bigotism in order to make all of the smaller bigotism and systemic racism not seem so bad. But again, I mean, those parts aren't aging well. The certain comments about gay people that are all strewn through this, or, any parts of this, for being a period piece, this did not age well at all. And it's not even like a full 10 years yet.
I know, which is a little surprising because the director is gay.
I know they're trying to show the opinions of that time, but like, it's not a movie about gay people. We're not doing Milk. So why throw that in there other than you're doing it for comedic effect, at which point it loses any meaning anyway.
Yeah, no, Tate Taylor was is gay. Has been in a long-term relationship with a producer in Hollywood. So I don't know. Apparently he didn't have a problem with some of the jokes, or I don't know. But
well, I know that we're in a different place where like these jokes were much more commonplace. And again, this movie happened before like the national tone had even changed on being LGBT friendly, let alone in the way that we're currently on. I mean, we're a couple of days removed from employment protection decisions, and a few years removed even from basically the complete opinion flip on gay marriage. But even so, it just I didn't think this would age as poorly as it did. So what did you have? I had a 2.
I had a 4. I have a very difficult time. I mean, I reserve my right to give 2s to films like St. Elmo's Fire.
Oh, again, we don't need to get into John Hughes films. You're dirtying the water. Again, maybe I was a little too harsh, and we've evened it out. To me, like a 0 or a 1 is like Birth of a Nation. So by that barometer, I'm probably too harsh. But then again, there are a lot of problems with this movie. So.
Well, I've only seen pieces of it, so Bonfires of the Vanity too, which a lot of people consider one of the worst.
We're going to review that. Why are you bringing all these weird films? Next, you're going to bring up Ishtar yet again.
I liked it.
So?
I thought it was funny.
All right. Now, this is going to be a category that I thought hard about this one. It's not a difficult, rewatchable movie. It's an enjoyable and entertaining movie, so I graded it a little higher. I gave it a 7, but there's a date and time. If we were to do this show 5 years from now, where this might be really cringy. So I reserve that is going to be a evolving number, but for right now, I'm going to say a 7.
I rate this as a comfort movie. I mean, is this movie macaroni and cheese? All right, that's the standard. Is this a movie that if it's on TV and I'm having a bad day and it comes on, I'm going to sit and watch it for a few minutes because I'm going to feel better? It is not that. And it's not going to get any better. It's going to get worse. So I gave it a 5.5 for that reason.
All right.
If it's on, I gotta be in the right frame of mind to watch it.
I will let
and that's where I have a problem.
To a full 6. Because you and I, this is the second time we've watched it. I don't know, unless we do a revisit on this, which I doubt, unless it's to downgrade it even further. But since it's likely not going to end up in the top 100, and it might be at the bottom of our current list, which I didn't think it would be a week ago. I don't know if we're going to even need to revisit this one, but, okay. Also, it has one of the lowest audience scores we have. It by far has the worst critic score of any of the movies we've reviewed so far. It had a 76, but the audience score was at 89, so we got to add that piece in.
So, too bad we can't have that audience score by region.
Well,
I just have a feeling that there was a certain
region
of the country had a lower score than another.
This isn't the Heisman vote, so anyway, that reaches it at a 34.65, which puts it way in dead last.
Well, when you're giving it 2s.
Well, yeah, but with a little bit of reason. Again, there's a possibility that some films won't age well. I'm very considerate that there are a few films that, of John Wayne in particular, where it's aggressively racist towards Native Americans that will not age well. Or Gone with the Wind, or...
How about Streetcar Named Desire, where there's a rape scene?
Yeah. That movie in particular is not going to play well in a Me Too world.
No, because everybody didn't believe Blanche Dubois.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, again, that's a different thing where some of the other categories might be higher, but the classicness on that one's going to be bad.
Yeah.
So, anyway, yes, it is number 19 on our overall list. Almost a full 6 points behind Inglourious Bastards.
Okay.
And almost a full 20 points behind our current leader, Back to the Future. So
I like Back to the Future. I still am having a hard time with that being on the number one on our board.
Again, we're probably going to have some revisit episodes, as well as some bonus content to kind of do this thing. So we'll get somebody else in to discuss that film and give it a revisit to see where it's at. But as of right now, it's still the top one on the board. Again, a perfect score is 60. So I doubt there is going to be a single 60 ever on the show. There are a couple of films I think could get close, but...
So, well, we'll have to do... So there's going to be a few films that are going to be more cultish in nature, but just so you're aware, and I don't know if you saw this, but they're having that movement out in Seattle with the
yes.
Black Lives Matter. Somebody created a fake account and tweeted out that there was an infighting, and they quoted from the Holy Grail.
Okay.
And Fox News picked it up, and this is being a true story about infighting within the group out in Seattle.
Yeah, well, given the fact that they were doing doctored photos, picking up articles on hearsay and rumor, which a particular end of the dinner table highlighted last weekend.
Yeah.
I won't say whom, but yeah. So there were some problematic pieces of that too. So outside of that, however, yeah. So this takes us to our last piece, and it's usually just our little finish up. But any remaining questions? I really only have one that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to what this movie was. And
Essentially, it's why did the women feel that they could hide when all of their cars are in the frickin' driveway? Like, there are like 15 cars in a driveway, and they think by turning off the lights and hiding behind the furniture that she won't know we're here. You could have just ignored her. It would have been that much bigger. But like, ooh, we have to preserve our niceties and all. That doesn't make any sense. And frankly, in a certain way, it's a dichotomy or the epitome of what I don't get about certain white women. But that's just my personal thing.
Yeah.
You have to preserve a certain level of decorum. Okay, you do that.
Image is greater than substance.
Yeah. Well, I wish we could talk more, but I'm expecting a friend for dinner. Join us next week again for a non-racial discussion on the movie Zodiac from 2005, starring Jake Gyllenhaal and Robert Downey Jr., about the Zodiac serial killer. Sounds like a riveting and just absolutely uproarious laughter episode.
Yeah. I can hardly wait. I can say that it's going to be a really light-hearted night.
Anyway, as usual, always rate, subscribe, review. We appreciate any of the listener base reaching out to us. I repeat my earlier claim that if we said something ignorant, offensive, or otherwise, please write into the show. I will give you space. You can do a pre-recorded message, whatever you'd like. And we'll give you some airspace for that because we're two privileged, middle-class white guys. So we're bound to have gotten something wrong. So, anyway.
And feel free. You have my email address. If somebody is out there would love to sit down and educate me, I will let you. I really would.
Fair enough. All right. Till next week, have a great week, everybody.